Question 1. Comparative studies suggest that municipal advisors often face complex ethical dilemmas. In California, a municipal advisor firm has been engaged by a city to assist with the issuance of new municipal bonds. The firm has a long-standing relationship with a particular underwriter, and it is anticipated that this underwriter will likely be selected for the bond issuance, which would result in a significant underwriting fee for the underwriter and a referral fee for the municipal advisor's firm. What is the most appropriate course of action for the municipal advisor to take to comply with MSRB Rule G42 and California's regulatory framework for municipal advisors? Option A. Immediately provide written disclosure to the city of the firm's relationship with the underwriter and the potential for referral fees, and explain how the firm will mitigate any potential conflict of interest in its advice. Option B. Proceed with advising the city on the bond issuance, assuming the city is aware of the common industry practice of municipal advisors working with specific underwriters. Option C. Conclude that no disclosure is necessary because the firm's primary duty is to provide the best advice to the city, and the underwriter selection is a separate decision for the city to make. Option D. Verbally inform the city's finance director about the firm's relationship with the underwriter and the potential for referral fees during a casual conversation. Correct answer is A. Immediately provide written disclosure to the city of the firm's relationship with the underwriter and the potential for referral fees, and explain how the firm will mitigate any potential conflict of interest in its advice. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a municipal advisor's duty to act in the best interest of a municipal entity and the potential for personal gain or the appearance of impropriety. Navigating these situations requires a deep understanding of the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB, Rule G42, on fair dealing with municipal entities, and related state laws governing conflicts of interest for municipal advisors in California. The advisor must prioritize the client's interests above all else, even when faced with lucrative opportunities that could benefit the firm. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate potential conflicts, ensuring transparency and adherence to fiduciary duties. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves proactively identifying the potential conflict of interest and immediately disclosing it in writing to the municipal entity. This approach aligns with MSRB Rule G42's emphasis on fair dealing and the fiduciary duty owed to municipal entities. By disclosing the relationship with the underwriter and the potential for increased fees, the municipal advisor demonstrates transparency and allows the municipal entity to make an informed decision about whether to proceed with the engagement or seek alternative advice. This proactive disclosure is crucial for maintaining trust and fulfilling the advisor's obligation to act solely in the best interest of the municipal entity. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the engagement without any disclosure. This fails to uphold the fiduciary duty mandated by MSRB Rule G42 and California state regulations. It creates an undisclosed conflict of interest, potentially leading the municipal entity to believe the advice is unbiased when it is not. This lack of transparency is a direct violation of fair dealing principles and can result in significant regulatory penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach is to only verbally inform the municipal entity about the relationship with the underwriter. While better than no disclosure, MSRB Rule G42 and California regulations generally require written disclosure of conflicts of interest. Verbal disclosures are easily forgotten, misconstrued, or denied, and they do not provide the clear, documented record necessary to demonstrate compliance and protect both the advisor and the municipal entity. A third incorrect approach is to assume that because the relationship with the underwriter is common in the industry, no disclosure is necessary. Industry custom does not override regulatory requirements for disclosure of conflicts of interest. MSRB Rule G42 and California laws are designed to protect municipal entities from potential harm arising from conflicts, regardless of how common they may be. Failing to disclose based on industry norms is a serious regulatory oversight. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, adherence to fiduciary duties, and proactive conflict identification. This involves 1. recognizing the potential for a conflict of interest whenever a personal or firm benefit might arise from advice given to a client. 2. Consulting the relevant regulatory framework, MSRB Rule G42 and California state laws, to understand specific disclosure and conduct requirements. 3. Prioritizing the client's best interest above any potential firm or personal gain. 4. Documenting all communications and decisions related to conflicts of interest. 5. Seeking guidance from compliance or legal counsel when in doubt about the appropriate course of action. Question 2. The investigation demonstrates that a California-based municipal advisory firm has engaged a consulting group, not registered as a municipal advisor, to identify potential new municipal clients. This consulting group has a history of making direct contact with elected officials and finance directors of municipalities, presenting the advisory firm services, and offering to facilitate introductions. The municipal advisory firm has a written agreement with the consulting group that states the consulting group will assist in business development, but does not explicitly prohibit or define what constitutes solicitation in the context of municipal advisory regulations. Given these circumstances, which of the following represents the most prudent and compliant course of action for the municipal advisory firm? Option A. Immediately revise the written agreement with the consulting group to explicitly define prohibited solicitation activities. Require the consulting group to adhere to all federal and California state municipal advisor regulations, and establish a clear oversight mechanism to monitor the consulting group's communications and activities. Option B. Rely on verbal assurances from the consulting group that they will conduct themselves ethically and in compliance with relevant laws, without formalizing these expectations in writing or establishing oversight. Option C. Interpret the term assist in business development broadly to include any communication that introduces the advisory firm, regardless of whether it could be construed as persuasive or influential in securing advisory business. Option D. Assume that since the consulting group is not registered as a municipal advisor, their activities are not subject to the municipal advisor's solicitation rules, and the firm is only responsible for its own direct solicitations. The correct answer is A. Immediately revise the written agreement with the consulting group to explicitly define prohibited solicitation activities. Require the consulting group to adhere to all federal and California state municipal advisor regulations, and establish a clear oversight mechanism to monitor the consulting group's communications and activities. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves navigating the complex regulatory landscape surrounding third-party solicitors in municipal advisory relationships, specifically within the state of California. The core issue is ensuring compliance with both federal and state regulations concerning the definition of solicitation and the responsibilities of municipal advisors when engaging with third parties who may be soliciting on their behalf. Misinterpreting these definitions or failing to establish proper oversight can lead to significant regulatory violations, reputational damage, and potential enforcement actions. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between permissible activities and those that constitute prohibited solicitation, especially when the third party's actions are not directly controlled by the municipal advisor. The best professional approach involves proactively establishing clear, written agreements with any third-party solicitor that explicitly define the scope of their activities, prohibit any form of solicitation that would violate municipal advisor regulations, and require the solicitor to adhere to all applicable federal and California state laws and regulations. This approach ensures that the municipal advisor maintains direct oversight and responsibility for all activities undertaken in connection with its advisory services, thereby preventing any misrepresentation or improper influence on potential clients. This aligns with the spirit and letter of regulations designed to protect municipal entities from undue influence and ensure the integrity of the municipal advisory process. An incorrect approach would be to assume that a third-party solicitor's actions are automatically compliant simply because they are an independent entity. This overlooks the municipal advisor's ultimate responsibility for the conduct of those acting on its behalf or in connection with its business. Another incorrect approach is to rely on verbal assurances from the third-party solicitor regarding their compliance without establishing a formal, written agreement that outlines specific prohibitions and oversight mechanisms. This lack of documented control and clear guidelines creates a significant compliance gap. Finally, a flawed approach would be to interpret the definition of solicitation narrowly, focusing only on direct financial inducements, and ignoring broader interpretations that encompass any communication intended to influence a decision to engage a municipal advisor, especially when conducted by a third party. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves first identifying potential regulatory touchpoints, such as the engagement of third-party solicitors. Second, they must thoroughly understand the relevant definitions and prohibitions within the applicable regulatory framework, including the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC rules, and California state laws governing municipal advisors and solicitation. Third, they should assess the risks associated with different engagement models and communication strategies. Finally, they must implement robust compliance policies and procedures, including clear contractual terms and ongoing monitoring, to mitigate identified risks and ensure adherence to all legal and ethical obligations. Question 3. In the state of New York, a municipal advisor has provided advice to an issuer regarding the structure and terms of an upcoming municipal securities offering. The municipal advisor's firm also has an underwriting department that is interested in bidding on this offering. What is the most appropriate action for the municipal advisor to take to comply with MSRB Rule G23? Option A. Continue to provide advice to the issuer on the offering's terms while verbally informing the issuer that the firm intends to underwrite the issue. Option B. Formally disclaim their status as a municipal advisor to the issuer for this specific transaction and cease providing advice, allowing the firm to pursue the underwriting role. Option C. Advise the issuer that the firm will underwrite the issue and suggest the issuer seek independent advice from another municipal advisor for any further structuring considerations. Option D. Proceed with underwriting the issue without any formal disclaimer, relying on the issuer's understanding of the firm's business practices. Correct answer is B. Formally disclaim their status as a municipal advisor to the issuer for this specific transaction and cease providing advice, allowing the firm to pursue the underwriting role. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because municipal advisors often operate in a dual capacity, potentially advising issuers on the structure and terms of municipal securities, while also engaging in underwriting activities for those same securities. The critical distinction lies in ensuring that advice provided to the issuer remains objective and solely in the issuer's best interest, free from the inherent conflicts of interest that arise when the advisor also intends to underwrite the offering. Navigating this requires a deep understanding of the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB Rule G23, which governs the activities of municipal advisors and their relationships with underwriters. The best professional approach involves a clear separation of roles and responsibilities. When a municipal advisor intends to underwrite an issue for which they have provided advice, they must formally disclaim their role as a municipal advisor and cease providing advice to the issuer regarding that specific offering. This disclaims the municipal advisor status for that transaction, thereby removing the protections and obligations associated with that role and allowing the firm to act solely as an underwriter. This approach directly adheres to MSRB Rule G23, B.1, which mandates that a municipal advisor must not engage in underwriting activities for an issue if they have provided advice to the issuer concerning that issue, unless they have first disclaimed their municipal advisor status for that transaction. This ensures that the issuer is aware of the potential conflict and can seek independent advice if they choose, and it prevents the advisor from leveraging their advisory position to gain an underwriting advantage. An incorrect approach would be to continue providing advice to the issuer regarding the terms and structure of the municipal securities, while simultaneously preparing to underwrite the issue. This directly violates MSRB Rule G23, B.1 by failing to disclaim municipal advisor status before engaging in underwriting activities for the same issue. Such conduct creates a significant conflict of interest, as the advisor's advice could be influenced by their desire to secure the underwriting position or to structure the deal in a way that is more profitable for the underwriting syndicate, rather than solely in the best interest of the issuer. Another incorrect approach is to inform the issuer verbally that the firm will be underwriting the issue, but to proceed with providing advice without a formal written disclaimer of municipal advisor status. While the issuer may be aware of the potential conflict, the lack of a formal disclaimer fails to meet the regulatory requirement of MSRB Rule G23, B.1. This informal communication does not constitute a proper disclaimer under the rule and leaves the issuer potentially unprotected and unaware of the full implications of the advisor's dual role. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to argue that since the firm has a long-standing relationship with the issuer implicitly understands the firm's intention to underwrite, and that a formal disclaimer is unnecessary. This ignores the explicit regulatory requirements of MSRB Rule G23, which mandates a formal disclaimer regardless of the existing relationship or perceived understanding. The rule is designed to provide clear and unambiguous notification of the change in role and the associated conflicts, and relying on implicit understanding is insufficient and professionally negligent. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. When faced with a potential conflict of interest involving advisory and underwriting roles, the primary consideration must be adherence to MSRB Rule G23. This involves proactively identifying situations where both roles might intersect, understanding the specific requirements for disclaiming municipal advisor status, and ensuring all communications and actions are documented and transparent. A commitment to acting solely in the client's best interest, even when it means foregoing a profitable opportunity, is paramount. Question 4. The monitoring system demonstrates a potential conflict of interest where a municipal advisor's firm is recommending a municipal security to a client, and that security is being underwritten by a broker-dealer affiliated with the municipal advisor's firm. In the state of New York, what is the most appropriate immediate action for the municipal advisor to take? Option A. Proceed with the transaction and disclose the affiliation to the client only after the trade has been executed. Option B. Proceed with the transaction after a brief discussion with their direct supervisor, assuming the affiliated broker-dealer's pricing is competitive. Option C. Proceed with the transaction, concluding that no conflict exists because the affiliated broker-dealer is reputable and the security is sound. Option D. Immediately escalate the flagged transaction to the firm's compliance department for a thorough review and guidance on disclosure. Correct answer is D. Immediately escalate the flagged transaction to the firm's compliance department for a thorough review and guidance on disclosure. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the firm's internal monitoring system has flagged a potential conflict of interest involving a municipal advisor and a client's investment in a municipal security underwritten by the advisor's affiliated broker-dealer. The core difficulty lies in balancing the firm's fiduciary duty to the client with the potential for financial gain through affiliated transactions. Navigating this requires a robust understanding of the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB, Rule G17 on fair dealing, and MSRB Rule G20 on gifts and gratuities, as well as the firm's own internal policies and procedures designed to mitigate such conflicts. Careful judgment is essential to ensure client interests are prioritized and regulatory obligations are met. The best approach involves immediately escalating the flagged transaction to the firm's compliance department for a thorough review. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the potential conflict by engaging the designated oversight function within the firm. MSRB Rule G17 mandates that municipal advisors must deal fairly with all parties and disclose all material facts, including conflicts of interest. By promptly reporting the flag, the firm initiates a process to identify and disclose any potential conflicts to the client, ensuring they can make an informed decision. This aligns with the fiduciary duty of a municipal advisor to act in the best interest of their clients. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the transaction after a cursory internal discussion among the municipal advisor and their immediate supervisor, without formal escalation to compliance. This is professionally unacceptable because it bypasses the established procedures for conflict resolution and may not involve individuals with the necessary expertise to assess the full scope of the conflict and its regulatory implications. It risks violating MSRB Rule G17 by failing to ensure fair dealing and adequate disclosure. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with the transaction, assuming the affiliated broker-dealer's pricing is competitive and therefore no conflict exists. This is professionally unacceptable as it makes an assumption about the absence of a conflict without proper investigation or disclosure. MSRB Rule G17 requires the disclosure of material facts, and the existence of an affiliated underwriter is a material fact that must be disclosed, regardless of pricing competitiveness, as it presents a potential incentive for the advisor to favor the affiliated entity. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to proceed with the transaction and only disclose the affiliation to the client after the transaction has been completed. This is professionally unacceptable because it violates the principle of informed consent. Disclosure must occur before the client commits to the transaction, allowing them to consider the implications of the conflict of interest. Waiting until after the fact negates the client's ability to make a truly informed decision and is a clear breach of MSRB Rule G17's fair dealing requirements. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear protocol for identifying, escalating, and resolving potential conflicts of interest. This includes understanding the firm's internal policies, recognizing the applicability of relevant MSRB rules, and prioritizing client interests above all else. When a potential conflict is flagged, the immediate step should always be to engage the compliance department for a thorough review and guidance, ensuring all necessary disclosures are made in a timely and transparent manner. Question 5. Regulatory review indicates a financial advisory firm in California is considering engaging with a newly formed public benefit corporation established by a California city to finance the construction of a new public transit system. The corporation will issue municipal bonds, with revenues generated by the transit system and a pledge of certain city-owned land as security for the bonds. What is the most appropriate initial step for the firm to take in determining the client's classification for regulatory purposes? Option A. Analyze the corporation's charter and bond covenants to determine if it meets the definition of a municipal entity or if it is an obligated person under MSRB Rule G44, considering the nature of its debt and security. Option B. Treat the corporation as a standard corporate client and apply general advisory principles without specific regard to its municipal or obligated person status. Option C. Assume the corporation is a municipal entity because it was established by a California city and is financing a public transit system. Option D. Focus on whether the corporation receives any direct funding from the city's general fund to determine its classification. The correct answer is A. Analyze the corporation's charter and bond covenants to determine if it meets the definition of a municipal entity or if it is an obligated person under MSRB Rule G44, considering the nature of its debt and security. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a municipal advisor must accurately distinguish between a municipal entity and an obligated person to ensure compliance with the Municipal Advisor Rule, Rule G44 of the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB, and other relevant regulations in California. Misclassifying a client can lead to significant regulatory violations, including acting as an advisor without proper registration or failing to adhere to the specific duties owed to each type of client. Careful judgment is required to apply the definitions precisely. The best professional practice involves a thorough review of the client's financial structure and the nature of their debt obligations. This approach correctly identifies the client as a municipal entity if it is a state or local government, or an agency or instrumentality thereof, that issues municipal securities. If the client is not a municipal entity, but is a person or entity that has entered into a municipal finance transaction and has pledged revenues or assets to secure repayment of municipal securities, then it is an obligated person. This distinction is critical because the Municipal Advisor Rule imposes specific duties on advisors to municipal entities and obligated persons, including the duty of care and the duty to act with the requisite diligence. Understanding the client's status under these definitions ensures the advisor can fulfill these duties appropriately and avoid regulatory pitfalls. An incorrect approach would be to assume that any entity issuing debt related to a public project is automatically a municipal entity. This fails to recognize that private entities can also be obligated persons if they pledge revenues or assets to secure municipal securities, even if they are not governmental bodies themselves. This misclassification could lead to the advisor not undertaking the necessary due diligence required for advising a true municipal entity or, conversely, applying inappropriate standards if the client is merely an obligated person. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on whether the entity receives public funding. While public funding is often associated with municipal entities, It is not the sole determinant. An entity could receive public funding but not be a municipal entity, or it could be a municipal entity that primarily relies on its own revenue streams. This narrow focus ignores the legal definition of a municipal entity and the specific criteria for identifying an obligated person. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to treat all clients issuing municipal debt identically, without verifying their specific classification under MSRB Rule G44. This overlooks the nuanced definitions and the varying regulatory obligations that attach to advising a municipal entity versus an obligated person. The MSRB rules are designed to address the unique characteristics and potential vulnerabilities of each client type, and a failure to differentiate can result in a breach of regulatory duty. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a deep dive into the definitions provided by the MSRB and relevant state laws in California. This involves scrutinizing the client's organizational structure, the nature of their debt issuance, and the source of repayment for that debt. When in doubt, seeking clarification from legal counsel or regulatory bodies is a prudent step to ensure accurate classification and subsequent compliance. Question 6. Consider a scenario where a firm is engaged to provide financial advisory services to a public housing authority in California. The engagement letter specifies that the firm will assist the authority in evaluating various financing options for a new affordable housing project, including the potential issuance of municipal bonds. The firm's compensation is a fixed annual retainer, independent of whether any bonds are ultimately issued or the success of any such issuance. What is the most appropriate course of action for the firm to determine if it qualifies for the IRMA exemption under Section 15-1-1D(1)(I) of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934? Option A. Assume the IRMA exemption applies because the client is a public housing authority, which is a governmental entity, and proceed with providing advisory services. Option B. Proceed with providing advisory services under the assumption of the IRMA exemption, without any written documentation or analysis supporting the eligibility, relying on the client's status as a public entity. Option C. Interpret the IRMA exemption broadly to include any entity that might benefit from municipal financing, even if not directly advising a governmental entity, as long as the compensation is not directly tied to a specific transaction. Option D. Conduct a detailed review of the public housing authority's status to confirm it is a governmental entity, and meticulously verify that the fixed annual retainer is not contingent on the issuance or success of any municipal securities transaction, documenting these findings. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed review of the public housing authority's status to confirm it is a governmental entity, and meticulously verify that the fixed annual retainer is not contingent on the issuance or success of any municipal securities transaction, documenting these findings. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a municipal advisor to navigate the complex regulatory landscape of exemptions from registration, specifically the Investment Advisors Act of 1940 IA, Rule 15-1-1D(1)(I), often referred to as the IRMA exemption for municipal advisors. The core difficulty lies in accurately assessing whether a particular engagement falls within the narrow confines of this exemption, which is designed for entities providing advice solely to governmental entities or certain nonprofit organizations, and crucially, not receiving compensation based on the success of the municipal securities transaction. Misinterpreting the exemption can lead to unregistered activity, significant regulatory penalties, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance while advising clients effectively. The best approach involves a thorough and documented review of the engagement terms and the client's nature. This includes confirming that the client is indeed a governmental entity or a conduit issuer, as defined by the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) rules, and meticulously verifying that the compensation structure for the advisory services is not contingent upon the issuance or sale of municipal securities. This proactive and detailed due diligence ensures that the advisor has a well-substantiated basis for claiming the IRMA exemption, aligning with the spirit and letter of SEC regulations. An incorrect approach would be to assume the exemption applies based solely on the client's stated status as a governmental entity, without independently verifying the compensation structure. This fails to address the critical condition that compensation must not be success-based, a fundamental requirement for the IRMA exemption. Relying on a client's assertion without independent confirmation exposes the advisor to regulatory scrutiny and potential violations. Another incorrect approach is to interpret the exemption broadly to include any entity that might indirectly benefit from a municipal financing, even if not directly advising a governmental entity. The IRMA exemption is strictly limited to advice provided to governmental entities or conduit issuers and does not extend to broader interpretations of benefit or influence. This misapplication disregards the specific scope defined by the SEC. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to proceed with advisory services under the assumption of the IRMA exemption, without any written documentation or analysis supporting the eligibility. The absence of a documented basis for claiming the exemption makes it impossible to defend the advisor's position if questioned by regulators. Compliance requires not just meeting the exemption's criteria, but also being able to demonstrate it. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of the exemption's requirements, meticulous documentation of the client's eligibility and the advisor's compensation structure, and a conservative interpretation of the rules. When in doubt, seeking legal counsel or consulting with regulatory bodies is a prudent step to ensure compliance and avoid potential pitfalls. Question 7. Upon reviewing a potential investor's inquiry regarding a municipality's upcoming bond offering in New York, a registered municipal advisor principal, acting in the capacity of a solicitor, needs to respond. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with Section 15b, E4a and Section 15b, E9 of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 as it pertains to their role as a solicitor? Option A. Discuss the general financial health of the municipality and its past investment performance to provide context for the offering. Option B. Forward publicly available financial reports of the municipality to the potential investor without any accompanying explanation or disclaimer. Option C. Clearly state their role as a solicitor and explicitly inform the investor that, due to this role, they are unable to provide investment advice or recommendations regarding the bond offering. Option D. Provide a general overview of the municipal bond market and current interest rate trends, without specific reference to the municipality. The correct answer is C. Clearly state their role as a solicitor and explicitly inform the investor that, due to this role, they are unable to provide investment advice or recommendations regarding the bond offering. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a municipal advisor principal to navigate the delicate balance between providing necessary information to potential investors and adhering to the strict limitations placed on municipal advisors regarding their role in the solicitation process, particularly when acting as a solicitor. The principal must ensure that any communication, even if seemingly informal, does not cross the line into prohibited solicitation activities as defined by Section 15b, E4a and Section 15b, E9 of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, as applied in the context of New York State's regulatory environment for municipal advisors. The principal's judgment is critical to avoid potential violations that could lead to severe regulatory consequences. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the municipal advisor principal clearly and explicitly stating their role as a solicitor and the limitations associated with that role to the potential investor. This approach directly addresses the requirement to disclose the capacity in which the advisor is acting and the associated restrictions on their communications. By proactively informing the investor that their communication is for the purpose of soliciting business as a solicitor and that they cannot provide investment advice or recommendations, the principal adheres to the spirit and letter of Section 15b, E4a and Section 15b, E9. This transparency ensures the investor understands the advisor's limitations and prevents any misinterpretation of the advisor's role, thereby avoiding the appearance of providing prohibited advice or engaging in unauthorized solicitation activities beyond the scope of a solicitor. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves the municipal advisor principal engaging in a discussion about the general financial health of the municipality and its past investment performance without explicitly clarifying their role as a solicitor or the limitations of that role. This is problematic because, even without direct recommendations, discussing financial health and past performance can be construed as implicitly influencing an investor's decision-making process, potentially crossing the line into providing advice or soliciting in a manner that violates the restrictions under Section 15b, E4a, and Section 15b, E9. The absence of explicit disclaimers creates ambiguity and risk. Another incorrect approach involves the municipal advisor principle, providing a general overview of the municipal bond market and current interest rate trends without any specific reference to the municipality or the potential investment. While seemingly neutral, this approach can still be problematic if the context of the conversation is clearly aimed at soliciting the investor for the municipality's bond offering. Without a clear statement of the solicitor role and its limitations, such general market commentary could be interpreted as an indirect attempt to build confidence or create an opportune moment for solicitation, thereby skirting the spirit of the regulations. A further incorrect approach involves the municipal advisor principle, forwarding publicly available financial reports of the municipality to the potential investor without any accompanying explanation or disclaimer. While the information itself is public, the act of forwarding it in the context of a potential solicitation, without clarifying the advisor's role as a solicitor and the limitations thereof, could be seen as an attempt to influence the investor's decision without adhering to the disclosure requirements of Section 15b, E4a, and Section 15b, E9. Lack of explicit communication about the advisor's capacity and the purpose of the communication is a significant oversight. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a proactive and transparent communication strategy. The decision-making process should begin with a clear understanding of the specific regulatory obligations for municipal advisors acting as solicitors under Section 15b, E4a, and Section 15b, E9. When initiating contact or responding to inquiries that could lead to solicitation, the advisor must prioritize explicit disclosure of their role and its inherent limitations. This involves clearly stating that they are acting as a solicitor and are therefore restricted from providing investment advice or recommendations. Any information shared should be framed within these disclosed limitations. If there is any doubt about whether a communication might be misconstrued as advice or prohibited solicitation, it is always safer to err on the side of caution and provide the necessary disclaimers or refrain from the communication altogether. The goal is to ensure that the potential investor is fully informed about the advisor's capacity and the boundaries of their engagement. Question 8. When evaluating a proposed bond issuance for the city of San Francisco, California, a municipal advisor identifies two financing structures. Structure A offers a higher upfront fee to the advisor's firm, but involves a more complex debt instrument with potentially higher long-term interest costs for the city. Structure B offers a lower fee but utilizes a simpler, more predictable debt instrument that is projected to result in lower overall interest payments for the city over the life of the bonds. The advisor's firm has a policy that generally favors transactions with higher fee potential. What is the most appropriate course of action for the municipal advisor to take, consistent with their SEC statutory fiduciary duty and anti-fraud rule obligations? Option A. Recommend Structure A to the City of San Francisco, emphasizing the immediate availability of funds and downplaying the potential for higher long-term interest costs, while highlighting the firm's expertise in managing complex debt instruments. Option B. Recommend Structure B to the City of San Francisco, providing a detailed analysis of the long-term cost savings and risk reduction, and fully disclosing the fee difference and the firm's internal fee preference policy. Option C. Recommend Structure B to the City of San Francisco, but only after securing a commitment from the city to consider future advisory services that might offer higher fees to offset the lower fee on this transaction. Option D. Recommend Structure A to the City of San Francisco, without explicitly mentioning the fee difference or the firm's fee preference policy, arguing that the complexity of the instrument is manageable and offers certain strategic advantages. The correct answer is B. Recommend Structure B to the City of San Francisco, providing a detailed analysis of the long-term cost savings and risk reduction, and fully disclosing the fee difference and the firm's internal fee preference policy. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a municipal advisor to navigate the complexities of the SEC statutory fiduciary duty standard under Section 15b, c. 1 of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, specifically within the context of advising a municipality in California. The advisor must balance the municipality's immediate financial needs with the long-term implications of their advice, ensuring that all recommendations are made in the best interest of the client, free from undue influence or conflicts of interest. The anti-fraud provisions are also paramount, demanding full and fair disclosure. The correct approach involves prioritizing the municipality's best interests above all else, even if it means recommending a less profitable course of action for the advisor's firm or suggesting a delay in the transaction. This means conducting a thorough, independent analysis of all available financing options, considering the municipality's financial capacity, future revenue streams, and overall economic climate in California. The advisor must then present all viable options, clearly outlining the risks and benefits of each, and make a recommendation that demonstrably serves the municipality's long-term financial health and objectives. This aligns directly with the SEC's statutory fiduciary duty, which mandates acting with the highest standards of diligence, care, and good faith, and is further reinforced by the anti-fraud rules prohibition against misleading statements or omissions. An incorrect approach would be to push for a particular financing structure that generates higher fees for the advisor's firm, even if it carries greater risk or is not the most advantageous for the municipality in the long run. This prioritizes the firm's financial gain over the client's best interest, violating the fiduciary duty. Another incorrect approach is to fail to disclose potential conflicts of interest, such as a pre-existing relationship with a particular underwriter or a financial incentive tied to a specific transaction type. Such omissions are deceptive and violate the anti-fraud provisions. Furthermore, providing incomplete or misleading information about the risks associated with a proposed financing, or failing to adequately assess the municipality's capacity to repay, would also constitute a breach of both the fiduciary duty and the anti-fraud rules. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the client's objectives and financial situation. This should be followed by a comprehensive and objective evaluation of all potential solutions, considering both short-term and long-term impacts. Transparency and full disclosure of all material information, including any potential conflicts of interest, are non-negotiable. The ultimate recommendation must be justifiable as being in the client's best interest, supported by diligent research and analysis, and compliant with all applicable federal and state regulations, including California-specific securities laws and SEC rules governing municipal advisors. Question 9. The analysis reveals that the City of Springfield, a municipality in Illinois, is seeking to refinance its outstanding general obligation bonds to take advantage of lower interest rates. The municipal advisor, a registered municipal advisor, has identified several potential refinancing structures. One structure offers a significantly higher upfront fee to the advisor, but involves a more complex debt instrument that may expose the city to greater interest rate volatility in the future. Another structure offers a standard refunding with a moderate fee and a predictable interest rate profile. Considering the City of Springfield's stated objective of minimizing financial risk and ensuring long-term budget stability, which of the following represents the most appropriate municipal advisor recommendation? Option A. Recommend the standard refunding without detailing the potential risks associated with the more complex option, assuming the city's limited financial expertise would make the complex option too difficult to understand. Option B. Recommend the standard refunding with a moderate fee, clearly explaining its predictable interest rate profile and alignment with the city's risk aversion, while also presenting the more complex option with a thorough analysis of its potential risks and rewards, allowing the city to make an informed decision. Option C. Recommend the more complex debt instrument, emphasizing the potential for greater savings if interest rates remain favorable, and highlighting the higher fee structure as indicative of the advanced advisory services provided. Option D. Recommend the standard refunding solely based on the lower fee to the advisor, without thoroughly exploring or presenting alternative structures that might offer greater long-term benefits to the city. The correct answer is B. Recommend the standard refunding with a moderate fee, clearly explaining its predictable interest rate profile and alignment with the city's risk aversion, while also presenting the more complex option with a thorough analysis of its potential risks and rewards, allowing the city to make an informed decision. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a municipal advisor to balance the financial interests of the issuer with the need to provide advice that is suitable for the issuer's specific circumstances, while adhering to the municipal advisor fiduciary duty under Section 15B of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, as interpreted by the SEC and FINRA. The advisor must avoid conflicts of interest and ensure that their recommendations are based on a thorough understanding of the issuer's financial condition and objectives. The best approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the issuer's financial health, including its existing debt structure, revenue streams, and future capital needs. This assessment should then be used to develop a range of financing options, each with a detailed analysis of its potential benefits and risks, tailored to the issuer's unique situation. The municipal advisor must then present these options to the issuer, clearly explaining the implications of each, and recommend the option that best aligns with the issuer's stated objectives and financial capacity. This aligns with the fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of the client, requiring diligence, care, and a thorough understanding of the client's needs and the market. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize a financing structure that offers the municipal advisor a higher fee, even if it is not the most advantageous for the issuer. This would violate the fiduciary duty by placing the advisor's financial interests above those of the client. Another incorrect approach is to recommend a complex or novel financing instrument without adequately explaining its risks and potential downsides to the issuer, or without ensuring the issuer has the capacity to manage such a structure. This demonstrates a failure in the duty of care and diligence. Finally, recommending a standard, off-the-shelf financing solution without considering the issuer's specific circumstances or unique needs would also be a failure, as it does not demonstrate the required level of tailored advice and due diligence. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the client's objectives and constraints. This should be followed by rigorous due diligence and analysis of all available options, considering both quantitative and qualitative factors. The advisor must then communicate these findings and recommendations clearly and transparently to the client, ensuring the client can make an informed decision. Conflicts of interest must be identified and managed proactively, always prioritizing the client's best interests. Question 10. The evaluation methodology shows that a municipal advisory firm in California, which advises municipal entities on the issuance of municipal securities, and also receives third-party compensation from certain underwriters for recommending their underwriting services, needs to update its written supervisory procedures, WSB, in accordance with MSRB Rule G44. The firm has identified a potential conflict of interest arising from this third-party compensation structure. Which of the following actions best addresses this situation and ensures compliance with regulatory requirements? Option A. Amend the firm's WSBs to include specific procedures for evaluating and approving any third-party compensation arrangements, detailing disclosure requirements to clients regarding such compensation, and establishing a pre-approval process for all such arrangements. Option B. Document the firm's general policy on avoiding conflicts of interest within the WSBs, without detailing specific procedures for managing third-party compensation from underwriters. Option C. Delegate the responsibility for managing conflicts of interest related to third-party compensation entirely to the individual municipal advisors involved in client engagements. Option D. Update the WSBs to include a clause stating that the firm will review and address conflicts of interest only if a client complaint is formally lodged. The correct answer is A. Amend the firm's WSBs to include specific procedures for evaluating and approving any third-party compensation arrangements, detailing disclosure requirements to clients regarding such compensation, and establishing a pre-approval process for all such arrangements. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that establishing robust written supervisory procedures, WSB, for municipal advisory activities is a cornerstone of regulatory compliance and ethical practice under the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB rules, specifically Rule G44. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a municipal advisor to proactively identify potential conflicts of interest and implement concrete measures to mitigate them, rather than reacting to issues after they arise. The complexity lies in anticipating various scenarios and ensuring the WSBs are not merely a document but a living framework that guides daily operations and employee conduct. The best approach involves a comprehensive review and update of the firm's existing WSBs to explicitly address the identified potential conflict of interest related to the receipt of third-party compensation for recommending specific municipal securities. This includes detailing the process for evaluating such compensation, requiring pre-approval for any such arrangements, and outlining disclosure requirements to clients regarding any such compensation received or anticipated. This approach is correct because it directly confronts the potential conflict by establishing clear guidelines for its management and disclosure, aligning with MSRB Rule G44's emphasis on supervision and compliance with fair dealing obligations. It demonstrates a commitment to identifying, evaluating, and mitigating conflicts of interest, which is a fundamental ethical and regulatory requirement for municipal advisors, an approach that involves merely documenting the firm's general policy on conflicts of interest without specific procedures for managing third-party compensation is insufficient. This fails to provide concrete guidance on how to handle the particular conflict, leaving room for inconsistent application and potential violations of fair dealing. It is a superficial response that does not meet the supervisory obligations mandated by MSRB Rule G44. Another unacceptable approach is to rely solely on the discretion of individual municipal advisors to manage such conflicts. This abdication of supervisory responsibility is a significant regulatory failure. WSBs are intended to provide a standardized framework for all employees, ensuring consistency and accountability. Allowing individual discretion without clear guidelines undermines the supervisory structure and increases the risk of non-compliance and client harm. Finally, an approach that focuses on updating WSBs only after a specific complaint has been received is reactive and fails to meet the proactive supervisory requirements. MSRB Rule G44 mandates that firms establish procedures to prevent violations, not just to address them after they occur. Waiting for a complaint signifies a failure in the firm's supervisory system to identify and mitigate risks before they materialize into actual violations or client harm. Professionals should adopt a proactive and systematic approach to developing and maintaining WSBs. This involves regularly reviewing regulatory requirements, anticipating potential conflicts of interest based on business activities, and developing specific, actionable procedures to address these conflicts. The process should include clear lines of responsibility, regular training for employees, and mechanisms for monitoring compliance and making necessary revisions to the WSBs. Question 11. Implementation of a municipal advisor's written supervisory policies and procedures is a critical component of regulatory compliance in California. A municipal advisor principal is reviewing the firm's business activities to ensure adherence. Which of the following monitoring strategies would best establish compliance with these policies? Option A. Focusing monitoring efforts exclusively on responding to and resolving client complaints as they are received. Option B. Delegating the primary responsibility for monitoring daily activities to the most senior registered municipal advisor representatives, with minimal direct oversight from the principal. Option C. Regularly reviewing transactional data and client communications for evidence of adherence to conflict disclosure requirements and advisory standards outlined in the firm's written supervisory procedures. Option D. Conducting annual, high-level reviews of completed municipal advisory engagements to identify any significant deviations from standard practices. The correct answer is C. Regularly reviewing transactional data and client communications for evidence of adherence to conflict disclosure requirements and advisory standards outlined in the firm's written supervisory procedures. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for municipal advisor principals, ensuring that their firm's business activities, particularly those involving potential conflicts of interest and the provision of advice, are consistently monitored to align with established written supervisory policies and procedures. The principal's responsibility extends beyond merely having policies in place. It requires active oversight to confirm their effective implementation and adherence by all supervised persons. This is critical because municipal advisory activities, especially those involving the issuance of municipal securities, are subject to stringent regulation by the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, to protect investors and the integrity of the municipal market. Failure to adequately monitor can lead to violations, reputational damage, and significant penalties. The best approach involves a proactive and systematic review of transactional data and communications, specifically looking for deviations from established policies and identifying potential conflicts of interest before they materialize into violations. This includes regularly reviewing trade blotters, client communications, and advisory engagement letters to ensure that all advice provided is documented, conflicts are disclosed, and supervisory procedures are being followed. This aligns with MSRB Rule G44, which requires municipal advisors to establish and maintain supervisory procedures reasonably designed to ensure compliance with the MSRB rules, and MSRB Rule G20, which addresses conflicts of interest. By focusing on the substance of advisory activities and comparing them against the written policies, the principal can identify and address issues early. An approach that relies solely on periodic, high-level reviews of completed transactions without a specific focus on supervisory policy adherence is insufficient. While reviewing completed transactions is part of oversight, it lacks the targeted scrutiny needed to confirm that supervisory policies, particularly those related to conflict management and disclosure, were actively applied during the advisory process. This passive approach risks overlooking subtle but significant breaches of policy. Another inadequate approach is to delegate the entire monitoring process to junior staff without establishing clear reporting lines and independent verification mechanisms. While delegation is necessary, the principal retains ultimate responsibility for supervision. Without a robust framework for the junior staff to report findings and for the principal to review those findings, the monitoring becomes less effective and the principal's oversight is compromised. This fails to meet the spirit and letter of supervisory responsibilities. Finally, an approach that focuses only on addressing complaints after they arise is reactive and fails to meet the proactive requirements of effective supervision. Written supervisory policies are designed to prevent violations, not merely to react to them. Relying solely on complaint resolution means that numerous potential policy breaches may have already occurred and gone unnoticed, potentially harming investors and the firm's compliance standing. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes a risk-based approach to supervision. This involves understanding the firm's business activities, identifying areas with the highest potential for compliance issues, e.g., complex financings, advisory roles with significant conflicts, and then designing monitoring procedures that specifically address those risks and align with written supervisory policies. Regular training, clear communication of expectations, and a culture that encourages reporting of potential issues are also crucial components of effective supervision. Question 12. To address the challenge of potentially material non-public information arising during the structuring of a new municipal bond issuance in California, what is the most appropriate course of action for a municipal advisor to take to ensure compliance with MSRB Rule G17 and fair dealing principles? Option A. Develop a clear communication protocol with the issuer that outlines the process for disclosing material non-public information to all potential investors simultaneously and through appropriate channels before engaging in discussions with investors. Option B. Proceed with preliminary discussions with a select group of potential investors, assuring them that the sensitive information will be handled confidentially and disclosed more broadly at a later, opportune time. Option C. Delay all discussions with potential investors until the information is no longer considered material, regardless of the impact on the issuer's financing timeline. Option D. Begin sharing the information with potential investors on a case-by-case basis, managing the disclosure informally as discussions progress. Correct answer is A. Develop a clear communication protocol with the issuer that outlines the process for disclosing material non-public information to all potential investors simultaneously and through appropriate channels before engaging in discussions with investors. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a municipal advisor to balance the fiduciary duty owed to a municipal entity with the need to maintain robust compliance procedures, particularly concerning the disclosure of material non-public information, M&PI. The pressure to secure financing quickly can create an environment where shortcuts are tempting, but adherence to MSRB Rule G17 and related guidance is paramount to protect both the client and the firm. Careful judgment is required to ensure all disclosures are made in a timely and appropriate manner, preventing potential conflicts of interest and regulatory violations. The best professional approach involves proactively identifying and addressing potential MNPI issues by establishing a clear communication protocol with the issuer. This protocol should outline when and how information will be shared with potential investors, ensuring that any information deemed material and non-public is disclosed to all potential investors simultaneously and through appropriate channels. This aligns with MSRB Rule G17's emphasis on fair dealing and preventing selective disclosure. By engaging the issuer in developing this protocol, the municipal advisor demonstrates a commitment to transparency and ethical conduct, fulfilling their fiduciary duty to act in the best interests of the municipal entity. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with discussions with potential investors without a clear plan for disclosing the sensitive information, hoping to manage it informally. This risks selective disclosure, violating MSRB Rule G17's prohibition against unfair dealing and potentially leading to market manipulation. Another incorrect approach is to delay the financing discussions until the information is no longer considered material. While seemingly cautious, this could jeopardize the issuer's financing objectives and may not be feasible given market conditions or the issuer's immediate needs, failing to act in the issuer's best interest. Finally, providing the information to a select group of investors while assuring them it is confidential, without a formal plan for broader disclosure, is a direct violation of fair dealing principles and MSRB rules, creating an uneven playing field for other market participants. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the nature of the information, assessing its materiality, and developing a compliant disclosure strategy before engaging in discussions with potential investors. This involves consulting with legal and compliance departments and proactively communicating with the issuer to establish a mutually agreeable and regulatory compliant disclosure process. Question 13. Examination of the data shows that California Financial Consultants, Inc., CFC, a firm based in Sacramento, California, provides accounting and financial planning services to the city of Oakland. CFC's primary business is accounting, and its engagement letter with the city of Oakland clearly delineates fees for accounting services. However, during the course of its accounting work, CFC staff have provided informal recommendations to the city regarding the timing of potential bond issuances and the general market conditions for municipal debt, without receiving any additional compensation beyond their agreed-upon accounting fees. Under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 and relevant SEC and MSRB interpretations, is CFC required to register as a municipal advisor in California? Option A. Yes, because CFC has a pre-existing business relationship with the city of Oakland, and any financial advice provided to a municipal entity necessitates registration. Option B. No, because CFC's advice regarding municipal securities is incidental to its primary business of providing accounting services, and it receives no separate compensation for this advice, thus falling under a statutory exclusion. Option C. No, because CFC is compensated by the city of Oakland for its services, and this compensation structure alone satisfies the exclusion criteria for municipal advisors. Option D. Yes, because CFC provided advice concerning municipal securities, regardless of whether it was incidental or separately compensated, triggering a registration requirement. The correct answer is B. No, because CFC's advice regarding municipal securities is incidental to its primary business of providing accounting services, and it receives no separate compensation for this advice, thus falling under a statutory exclusion. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of the statutory exclusions from municipal advisor registration under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 and related SEC rules, specifically as they apply to entities operating within the state of California. Misinterpreting these exclusions can lead to significant regulatory violations, including operating as an unregistered municipal advisor, which carries severe penalties. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between activities that fall within an exclusion and those that necessitate registration. The best professional practice involves a thorough review of the specific activities undertaken by the entity in question against the precise language and interpretive guidance of the statutory exclusions. This includes meticulously examining whether the entity's advice is solely incidental to its primary business, and whether it receives compensation solely from the entity to which it provides advice, as outlined in Rule G42 of the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB, which is incorporated by reference and interpreted under federal securities laws for municipal advisors. If the entity's activities align with the conditions of an exclusion, such as providing advice that is purely incidental to its core business of providing accounting services and receiving compensation only from its client for those accounting services, then no registration as a municipal advisor is required. This approach ensures compliance by adhering strictly to the defined boundaries of the exclusions. An incorrect approach would be to assume that any entity providing financial-related advice to a municipal entity is automatically excluded from registration. For instance, if the entity provides advice on the structure or issuance of municipal securities, even if it also provides accounting services, and receives separate compensation for this advisory role, it likely exceeds the scope of the incidental advice exclusion. This failure to recognize that the nature and compensation for the advice are critical factors for exclusion would lead to a regulatory violation. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the fact that the entity is compensated by the municipal entity it advises. While compensation structure is a factor, it is not the sole determinant. If the advice provided is not incidental to a primary, non-advisory business, or if the compensation is specifically for the municipal advisory services rather than being bundled within fees for a distinct primary service, the exclusion may not apply. This misapplication of the compensation prong of the exclusion can result in noncompliance. Furthermore, an incorrect approach would be to interpret the exclusion broadly to encompass any entity that has a pre-existing relationship with a municipal entity. Regardless of the specific nature of the advice given, the exclusions are narrowly defined and require strict adherence to their specific conditions. Failing to conduct a detailed analysis of the advisory activities and compensation structure against the precise regulatory text and guidance would be a significant professional failing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the definition of a municipal advisor. Subsequently, they must meticulously analyze the entity's activities and compensation model against each of the statutory and regulatory exclusions. This involves consulting the relevant sections of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, SEC rules, and MSRB rules, as well as any applicable no-action letters or interpretive guidance. When in doubt, seeking formal legal or regulatory counsel is the most prudent course of action to ensure accurate compliance. Question 14. Research into the oversight responsibilities of regulatory agencies governing municipal advisory business in California reveals a municipal advisor is assisting a small rural county with its first-ever bond issuance. The county has limited staff and no prior experience with municipal securities disclosure requirements. The municipal advisor needs to ensure the county meets all disclosure obligations. Which of the following approaches best fulfills the municipal advisor's responsibilities? Option A. Inform the county that as a municipal advisor, their role is limited to providing advice on the bond issuance structure, and all disclosure responsibilities rest solely with the county government. Option B. Recommend a standardized, comprehensive disclosure package that has been used for other municipal issuances, assuming it will cover all necessary information for this county. Option C. Proactively engage with the county's designated representatives to understand their current financial reporting practices and identify any existing disclosure gaps, then recommend tailored improvements to their disclosure process. Option D. Advise the county to rely primarily on publicly available financial data and SEC filings from similar municipalities to construct their disclosure documents. The correct answer is C. Proactively engage with the county's designated representatives to understand their current financial reporting practices and identify any existing disclosure gaps, then recommend tailored improvements to their disclosure process. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for municipal advisors in California, where the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB rules, enforced by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, and FINRA, intersect with state-specific disclosure requirements and the fiduciary duty owed to municipal entities. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive disclosure with the practicalities of information gathering, and the potential for overwhelming the issuer. A municipal advisor must navigate these competing interests while upholding their regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves proactively engaging with the issuer's designated representatives to understand their existing disclosure practices and identify any gaps or areas requiring enhancement. This approach aligns with MSRB Rule G44, which outlines the duty of supervision for municipal advisors and implicitly supports the need for thorough due diligence. By seeking to understand the issuer's current disclosure framework, the municipal advisor can then recommend tailored improvements that are both compliant with federal regulations and practical for the issuer to implement. This demonstrates a commitment to fulfilling the advisor's fiduciary duty by ensuring the issuer is adequately informed and prepared for the disclosure process, thereby protecting the municipal entity and its investors. Incorrect approaches analysis. Recommending a generic, one-size-fits-all disclosure package without understanding the issuer's specific circumstances fails to meet the standard of care expected of a municipal advisor. This approach neglects the nuanced needs of individual municipal entities and could lead to either insufficient disclosure, violating SEC and MSRB requirements, or unnecessary burdens on the issuer. Relying solely on publicly available information without direct engagement with the issuer is also problematic. While public information is a starting point, it may not capture all relevant details or the issuer's specific interpretation of their financial health and operational status, potentially leading to incomplete or misleading advice. Suggesting the issuer handle all disclosure matters independently, while seemingly deferential, abdicates the municipal advisor's core responsibility. The advisor is engaged precisely to provide expertise and guidance on disclosure, and failing to do so constitutes a dereliction of duty under MSRB rules and general ethical principles governing advisory relationships. Professional reasoning. Municipal advisors in California must adopt a client-centric approach to disclosure. This involves a thorough understanding of the issuer's unique situation, a proactive engagement strategy to gather necessary information, and the provision of tailored advice that ensures compliance with all applicable federal and state regulations. The advisor's role is to facilitate informed decision-making by the municipal entity, which requires a deep dive into their specific disclosure capabilities and needs, rather than applying a superficial or hands-off methodology. Question 15. Which approach would be most effective for a municipal advisor principal in New York to ensure compliance with MSRB rules regarding conflicts of interest when advising a municipality on a new bond issuance? Option A. Proactively identify and fully disclose all potential conflicts of interest to the municipal issuer prior to commencing advisory services. Option B. Disclose only those conflicts that have a direct and quantifiable financial impact on the specific bond issuance. Option C. Assume no disclosure is necessary as long as the firm has not been previously cited for conflicts of interest. Option D. Disclose potential conflicts of interest only if the municipal issuer specifically inquires about them. The correct answer is A. Proactively identify and fully disclose all potential conflicts of interest to the municipal issuer prior to commencing advisory services. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a municipal advisor principal to balance the need for efficient regulatory compliance with the ethical obligation to ensure fair and transparent dealings with municipal entities. The principal must navigate the complexities of the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB rules, specifically those pertaining to conflicts of interest and disclosure, while also considering the specific financial needs and vulnerabilities of the municipal issuer. Careful judgment is required to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, which can severely damage the firm's reputation and lead to regulatory sanctions. The approach that represents best professional practice involves proactively identifying and disclosing potential conflicts of interest to the municipal issuer before any engagement begins. This includes a thorough review of the firm's existing relationships and business activities that could reasonably be construed as creating a conflict. By providing comprehensive disclosure, the municipal advisor principal empowers the issuer to make an informed decision about whether to proceed with the engagement and allows them to assess the potential impact of the conflict on the advice provided. This aligns directly with MSRB Rule G42 on fair dealing with municipal entities, which mandates that municipal advisors must deal fairly with municipal entities and must not engage in deceptive practices. Furthermore, it upholds the ethical principle of transparency and good faith, ensuring that the municipal entity's best interests are prioritized, an approach that involves disclosing conflicts only if directly questioned by the municipal issuer is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the proactive disclosure requirements of MSRB Rule G42 and creates a significant ethical lapse by withholding material information that could influence the issuer's decision. It suggests an intent to obscure potential biases rather than to foster transparency. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to assume that because the firm has not previously been cited for conflicts, no disclosure is necessary. Regulatory compliance is an ongoing obligation, and the absence of past violations does not absolve the firm of its current responsibilities. Each engagement must be assessed independently for potential conflicts, and the firm cannot rely on historical precedent to bypass current disclosure requirements. This approach demonstrates a lack of diligence and a misunderstanding of the dynamic nature of regulatory expectations. Finally, an approach that involves disclosing only those conflicts that directly impact the financial outcome of a specific transaction, while ignoring broader business relationships, is also unacceptable. MSRB Rule G42 requires disclosure of any conflict that could reasonably be expected to impair the municipal advisor's exercise of impartial judgment. This includes not only direct financial impacts, but also any relationship that could create a bias, such as significant business dealings with potential underwriters or other parties involved in the municipal financing. The professional reasoning framework for such situations should involve a multi-step process. First, a thorough understanding of all applicable MSRB rules and ethical guidelines. Second, a comprehensive internal review of all potential conflicts of interest for each specific engagement. Third, a commitment to proactive and transparent disclosure to the municipal entity. And fourth, ongoing monitoring and reassessment of conflicts throughout the advisory relationship. Question 16. The evaluation methodology shows that a municipal advisor in California is advising a school district on a complex bond issuance. The advisor has identified several potential financing structures, some of which offer higher upfront fees for the advisor, but may not be the most cost-effective or flexible for the school district in the long term. The advisor also knows of other structures that are more beneficial to the district, but yield lower compensation for the advisor. What is the most appropriate course of action for the municipal advisor? Option A. Recommend the financing structure that provides the highest upfront fees for the municipal advisor, as this compensation is necessary to cover the advisor's costs and expertise. Option B. Present only the financing options that are most profitable for the municipal advisor, omitting those that offer less compensation, to streamline the decision-making process for the school district. Option C. Conduct a thorough and objective analysis of all available financing options, prioritizing those that best align with the school district's stated financial and policy objectives, and present a clear recommendation based on this analysis, irrespective of the advisor's compensation. Option D. Advise the school district to proceed with the financing structure they initially expressed interest in, without conducting an independent analysis of alternative options that might be more beneficial. The correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough and objective analysis of all available financing options, prioritizing those that best align with the school district's stated financial and policy objectives, and present a clear recommendation based on this analysis, irrespective of the advisor's compensation. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that a municipal advisor's primary duty is to act in the best interest of the client, which in the context of municipal advisory services means prioritizing the client's financial and policy objectives. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the municipal advisor to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure that their recommendations are solely driven by the client's needs, not by personal gain or the interests of third parties. The advisor must demonstrate a thorough understanding of the client's specific circumstances and objectives. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and objective assessment of all available financing options, considering their impact on the client's financial health and policy goals. This includes a detailed analysis of the costs, benefits, risks, and feasibility of each option, presented in a clear and understandable manner to the client. The advisor must then provide a recommendation based on which option best aligns with the client's stated objectives, even if it means recommending a less profitable option for the advisor. This aligns with the core fiduciary duty and the requirements of Section 15-1-1d. 3. Roman 4 of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, which mandates that municipal advisors must have a reasonable basis to believe that their advice is in the best interest of the municipal entity client. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize financing options that offer higher fees or commissions to the municipal advisor, even if they are not the most advantageous for the client. This directly violates the best interest duty, as it introduces a conflict of interest where the advisor's personal gain supersedes the client's financial well-being. Such an approach would fail to meet the regulatory standard of providing advice that is in the client's best interest. Another incorrect approach is to present a limited selection of financing options, omitting those that might be more beneficial to the client but less lucrative for the advisor. This misleads the client by not providing a complete picture of the available choices, thereby preventing the client from making a fully informed decision. This failure to disclose all relevant options is a breach of transparency and the advisor's duty to provide comprehensive advice. Finally, an incorrect approach involves relying solely on the issuer's initial preferences without conducting an independent and thorough analysis of alternative financing structures. While understanding the issuer's preferences is important, the municipal advisor's role is to provide expert advice that may include suggesting superior alternatives or highlighting potential drawbacks of the issuer's initial ideas, all in service of the client's best interest. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the client's objectives and constraints. This should be followed by a diligent and unbiased investigation of all viable options, a thorough analysis of the pros and cons of each option relative to the client's goals, and a transparent presentation of findings and recommendations. Any potential conflicts of interest must be identified, disclosed, and managed in a way that ensures the client's interests remain paramount. Question 17. The evaluation methodology shows that a municipal advisor, acting as a fiduciary for a municipality in California, is negotiating the terms of an engagement letter. The advisor's proposed fee structure includes a base fee plus a significant additional percentage of the principal amount of any municipal securities issued as a result of the advisor's services. The advisor believes this fee structure is common in the industry. What is the most appropriate course of action for the municipal advisor to take regarding this fee structure? Option A. Proactively disclose the fee structure to the municipal client. Explain how the fees are calculated and obtain the client's informed consent to the engagement based on this fee arrangement. Option B. Proceed with the engagement based on the proposed fee structure, as it is a common practice within the municipal advisory industry. Option C. Argue to the municipal client that the fee structure is standard and therefore does not represent a conflict of interest that requires special consideration. Option D. Disclose the fee structure to the municipal client only after the engagement has commenced and the client has begun to rely on the advisor's services. The correct answer is A. Proactively disclose the fee structure to the municipal client, explain how the fees are calculated, and obtain the client's informed consent to the engagement based on this fee arrangement. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that a municipal advisor's primary duty is to act in the best interest of the municipal entity or obligated person. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the advisor's potential for increased compensation against the municipal client's need for objective advice, creating a conflict of interest that requires careful navigation. The advisor must prioritize the client's interests above their own financial gain. The best approach involves proactively disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the municipal client and seeking their informed consent before proceeding with the engagement. This approach is correct because it aligns with MSRB Rule G42 on municipal advisor obligations. Specifically, Rule G42(a)(I) mandates that a municipal advisor must have a reasonable basis to believe that its advice is in the best interest of the municipal entity or obligated person. By disclosing the potential for increased fees tied to the issuance of municipal securities, the advisor is transparent about a factor that could influence their advice. Seeking informed consent demonstrates that the client is aware of the potential conflict and has agreed to proceed, thereby mitigating the conflict. This upholds the fiduciary duty owed to the client. An incorrect approach involves proceeding with the engagement without disclosing the fee structure that is directly tied to the volume of municipal securities issued. This fails to meet the best interest standard because the advisor's compensation is directly linked to a specific outcome, issuance of securities, creating a strong incentive to recommend issuance even if other, less costly, or more suitable financing options might exist for the client. This lack of transparency violates the spirit and letter of MSRB Rule G42 by not ensuring the advice is truly in the client's best interest, as the advisor's financial interests are not fully aligned with the client's. Another incorrect approach involves only disclosing the fee structure after the engagement has begun and the client has already committed to the process. This is professionally unacceptable because it deprives the client of the opportunity to make an informed decision about whether to engage the advisor in the first place, given the potential conflict. The client should have the ability to assess the advisor's objectivity from the outset. A further incorrect approach involves arguing that the fee structure is standard industry practice and therefore does not constitute a conflict. While certain fee structures may be common, the mere prevalence of a practice does not negate a conflict of interest or absolve the advisor of their duty to act in the client's best interest. MSRB rules require a proactive assessment of conflicts, not a reliance on industry norms to excuse potential impropriety. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential conflicts of interest inherent in any engagement. This should be followed by a thorough review of applicable MSRB rules, particularly Rule G42. The next step is to determine the most transparent and client-centric method for addressing the identified conflict, which typically involves full disclosure and obtaining informed consent before any advice is rendered or services are performed. If a conflict cannot be adequately mitigated through disclosure and consent, the professional should decline the engagement. Question 18. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a municipal advisor's firm stands to earn a significantly higher fee by structuring a new bond issuance for the city of Springfield, Illinois, using a specific type of derivative product. However, an independent analysis suggests that a simpler, less complex financing structure, while yielding a lower fee for the firm, result in a lower overall interest cost and reduced financial risk for the city over the life of the bonds. As the principal responsible for overseeing the firm's municipal advisory activities in Illinois, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Advise the City of Springfield to engage a separate independent financial advisor to evaluate the proposed financing structures, thereby shifting the responsibility for the ultimate recommendation. Option B. Proceed with recommending the derivative-based financing structure that offers the highest fee for the firm, emphasizing its potential benefits to the city, while downplaying the associated risks and the availability of less costly alternatives. Option C. Recommend the simpler financing structure to the City of Springfield, providing a clear and comprehensive explanation of why it is in their best financial interest, even though it results in a lower fee for the firm. Option D. Recommend the derivative-based financing structure that offers the highest fee for the firm, but disclose the existence of the simpler alternative and its potential benefits to the city. The correct answer is C. Recommend the simpler financing structure to the City of Springfield, providing a clear and comprehensive explanation of why it is in their best financial interest, even though it results in a lower fee for the firm. Explanation. Cost-benefit analysis shows that while engaging in municipal advisory services can be profitable, it carries significant regulatory responsibilities under Section 15B, E, 8, and Section 15B, E, 10 of the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, as amended by the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. These sections mandate that municipal advisors act in the best interests of the municipal entity or conduit and prohibit fraudulent, deceptive, or manipulative acts. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a municipal advisor principle to balance the firm's financial interests with the fiduciary duty owed to a municipal client, particularly when faced with a situation where a proposed transaction, while potentially lucrative for the firm, may not be the most advantageous for the municipality. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with the best interests standard and to avoid any appearance of impropriety or conflict of interest. The best professional approach involves prioritizing the municipality's financial well-being above the firm's potential profit. This means conducting a thorough and objective analysis of all available financing options, including those that may offer lower fees to the firm, but are demonstrably more beneficial to the municipal issuer in terms of cost, risk, and long-term financial health. The advisor must present all viable alternatives to the municipal client, clearly outlining the pros and cons of each, and making a recommendation based solely on what serves the client's best interests. This aligns directly with the core tenets of Section 15b(e)(8), which requires acting with the care of a prudent person and in the best interests of the municipal entity, and Section 15b(e)(10), which prohibits deceptive practices, an approach that focuses primarily on securing the transaction that yields the highest fee for the firm, even if other options are slightly more favorable to the municipality, is professionally unacceptable. This prioritizes the firm's financial gain over the client's best interests, directly violating Section 15b(e)(8). Furthermore, if the advisor fails to disclose the potential for higher fees in alternative, more beneficial structures, or downplays the advantages of those alternatives, it could be construed as a deceptive practice under Section 15b(e)(10). Another professionally unacceptable approach is to recommend a financing structure solely because it is the most familiar or easiest to implement for the advisory firm, without a rigorous comparison to other potentially superior options for the municipality. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to act with the care of a prudent person, again contravening Section 15b(e)(8). The advisor's duty is to explore all reasonable avenues to achieve the best outcome for the client, not to take the path of least resistance for themselves. Finally, an approach that involves pressuring the municipal client to accept a particular financing structure by highlighting only the perceived benefits to the municipality while omitting or minimizing potential drawbacks, or by creating a sense of urgency that discourages thorough evaluation, is also professionally unsound. This can be seen as manipulative and deceptive, violating Section 15b(e)(10). The advisor must provide complete and transparent information to enable the client to make an informed decision. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the fiduciary duty owed to the municipal client. This means always asking, is this recommendation truly in the best financial interest of the municipality, considering all available options and potential risks? The process should include a comprehensive due diligence phase, objective analysis of alternatives, transparent communication with the client, and a commitment to recommending the option that best serves the client's long-term financial health, even if it means lower immediate compensation for the advisory firm. Question 19. The City of Springfield, Illinois, a municipal entity with limited municipal finance experience, is seeking advice from a municipal advisor regarding a proposed bond issuance. The municipal advisor also has a separate, ongoing business relationship with a company that is a potential underwriter for these bonds. Under MSRB Rule G42, what is the most appropriate course of action for the municipal advisor to ensure compliance with its obligations regarding conflicts of interest? Option A. Assume that the long-standing relationship with the City of Springfield negates any potential for conflicts of interest and proceed with providing advice without further disclosure. Option B. Disclose the existing business relationship with the potential underwriter to the City of Springfield and obtain the city's informed consent to continue providing advisory services. Option C. Wait for the City of Springfield to inquire about potential conflicts of interest before disclosing any business relationships. Option D. Provide advice on the bond issuance and only disclose the business relationship with the potential underwriter if the city explicitly asks about it after the advice has been given. The correct answer is B. Disclose the existing business relationship with the potential underwriter to the City of Springfield and obtain the city's informed consent to continue providing advisory services. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a municipal entity, the City of Springfield, Illinois, is considering issuing bonds to finance a new public library. The city has limited experience with municipal finance and is seeking advice on the structure and terms of the bond issuance. This scenario is professionally challenging because the City of Springfield, as a municipal entity, is susceptible to conflicts of interest when engaging financial advisors. The Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB Rule G42, specifically addressing municipal advisors, mandates that such advisors must have a process to identify and manage conflicts of interest. The role of the qualified independent representative, CUR, is crucial in ensuring that the advice provided to the municipal entity is objective and free from undue influence, particularly when the advisor may have other business relationships that could create a conflict. The best approach involves the municipal advisor proactively identifying potential conflicts of interest and disclosing them to the City of Springfield. This includes disclosing any relationships or transactions that could impair the advisor's objectivity or independence. Following disclosure, the advisor must obtain the municipal entity's informed consent to proceed. This process ensures transparency and allows the City of Springfield to make an informed decision about whether to continue with the advisor, understanding the potential conflicts. This aligns with the spirit and letter of MSRB Rule G42, which emphasizes the advisor's duty of care and fair dealing, and the importance of managing conflicts of interest. An incorrect approach would be to assume that because the advisor has a long-standing relationship with the city, conflicts of interest are unlikely or can be ignored. This fails to acknowledge the regulatory requirement for a proactive process to identify and manage conflicts, regardless of the duration of the relationship. Another incorrect approach is to only disclose conflicts if they are explicitly requested by the municipal entity. MSRB Rule G42 places the onus on the advisor to identify and disclose, not to wait for a request. Finally, proceeding with advice without obtaining informed consent after disclosing a conflict is also a failure. Informed consent is a critical step in the conflict management process, ensuring the client understands and accepts the potential implications. Professionals should adopt a framework that prioritizes proactive identification, transparent disclosure, and informed consent when dealing with potential conflicts of interest. This involves a thorough review of all business relationships and transactions that could impact objectivity, followed by clear and comprehensive communication with the municipal entity. The decision-making process should always be guided by the principles of fair dealing and the duty of care owed to the municipal client, as mandated by MSRB regulations. Question 20. The audit findings indicate that a municipal advisor, acting as an advisor to the City of Springfield, Illinois, on a new general obligation bond issuance, directly negotiated the purchase price of the bonds with a syndicate of investors and committed to a specific resale price for a portion of the issue before the official pricing date. The municipal advisor's fee was structured as a flat fee for advisory services. Based on these facts, which of the following best describes the municipal advisor's actions in relation to MSRB Rule G23? Option A. The municipal advisor's actions were permissible as long as the flat fee structure ensured no direct profit from the underwriting spread, regardless of the negotiation process. Option B. The municipal advisor was acting within the scope of advisory services by facilitating a favorable price for the issuer, which is a key aspect of providing sound financial advice. Option C. The municipal advisor was merely acting as a conduit to connect the issuer with potential investors, which is a standard practice for municipal advisors. Option D. The municipal advisor engaged in prohibited underwriting activities by directly negotiating the purchase price and committing to a resale price, thereby violating MSRB Rule G23. The correct answer is D. The municipal advisor engaged in prohibited underwriting activities by directly negotiating the purchase price and committing to a resale price, thereby violating MSRB Rule G23. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a complex situation where a municipal advisor's actions blur the lines between providing advice and engaging in underwriting activities, specifically concerning the pricing and sale of municipal securities. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, MSRB, Rule G23, which governs the activities of municipal advisors, and the distinction between advisory services and underwriting. Misinterpreting these boundaries can lead to significant regulatory violations, reputational damage, and potential financial penalties. Careful judgment is required to ensure that advice provided is solely in the best interest of the issuer and does not inadvertently create conflicts of interest or constitute prohibited underwriting activities. The best professional practice involves a clear separation of advisory and underwriting functions. In this case, the municipal advisor should refrain from directly negotiating the purchase price of the bonds with potential investors or committing to a specific resale price. Instead, their role should have been limited to advising the issuer on market conditions, potential pricing strategies, and the structure of the offering, allowing the issuer to engage a separate underwriter to conduct the actual sale and price negotiation. This approach ensures that the municipal advisor acts solely as an advisor to the issuer, fulfilling their fiduciary duty without engaging in activities that MSRB Rule G23 defines as underwriting. The advisor's compensation should be based on the advisory services rendered, not on the success of the bond sale or the spread achieved by an underwriter. Engaging in direct price negotiation with investors and committing to a resale price constitutes an underwriting activity. This is a direct violation of MSRB Rule G23, which prohibits a municipal advisor from acting as an underwriter in connection with an issue for which they have provided advice. By participating in these negotiations, the advisor creates a conflict of interest, as their compensation could be indirectly tied to the underwriting spread, compromising their ability to provide objective advice to the issuer. Furthermore, failing to disclose this dual role to the issuer is a breach of ethical conduct and potentially a violation of MSRB Rule G17 regarding fair dealing. Another incorrect approach would be to argue that the advisor was merely facilitating the sale by connecting the issuer with potential buyers. While facilitating connections can be part of advisory services, directly negotiating the purchase price and committing to a resale price goes beyond mere facilitation. It involves taking on the risk and responsibility typically associated with an underwriter, which is explicitly prohibited under MSRB Rule G23. This action blurs the lines of responsibility and creates a conflict of interest by allowing the advisor to profit from the transaction in a manner akin to an underwriter. A third incorrect approach would be to claim that the advisor's actions were acceptable because they were acting in the best interest of the issuer by securing a favorable price. While acting in the issuer's best interest is paramount, the method employed here violates regulatory prohibitions. MSRB rules are designed to prevent conflicts of interest and ensure market integrity. Even if the outcome appears beneficial, the process of engaging in prohibited underwriting activities renders the actions unacceptable. The advisor's fiduciary duty is to provide objective advice, not to engage in the underwriting process itself. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a rigorous assessment of MSRB Rule G23 and related guidance. Professionals must clearly delineate between advisory and underwriting roles. When in doubt, it is always best to err on the side of caution and seek clarification from legal counsel or compliance departments. The advisor should focus on providing advice regarding market conditions, pricing strategies, and the selection of an underwriter, rather than directly participating in the negotiation and sale of the securities. Transparency with the issuer regarding all roles and potential conflicts is also critical.